Everything seemed normal at first. I had this idea that my marriage with Megan was solid, built on trust, shared experiences, and a good amount of love. We'd been together for 6 years and married for 3, and I thought we had a future laid out in front of us. We didn't argue much, sure. There were the occasional disagreements over petty things like the dishes or who left the lights on, but nothing that ever felt serious. Megan was always a bit more independent than most people I knew, but I respected that. She had her friends, her career, and her hobbies, and I loved that she wasn't dependent on me for every little thing. But over time, things started to shift. At first, it was subtle, a missed dinner here and there, an extra work event that she'd go to with a coworker who I had never met before. I didn't make a big deal out of it, even though the gut feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't go away. I tried to brush it off because Megan was always supportive, and I thought I was just being paranoid. But the longer it went on, the more distant she became. She started spending more time on her phone, always face down when I was around, and the text messages seemed endless. When I asked who she was texting, she'd just say it was work or one of her friends, but there was a different tone in her voice, more defensive, more secretive. I started to question whether I was just imagining things or if there was something more going on. It wasn't just the texts, though. Megan had been coming home later and later from her supposed work events, sometimes smelling of perfume I didn't recognize, always with a vague explanation that she'd just gone out for a drink after a meeting. When I pressed her about it, she'd brush it off, insisting I was overthinking everything. But the thing is, deep down, I wasn't stupid. I had this nagging feeling that something was off. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to admit that Megan, the woman I trusted, could be hiding something from me. But the signs were starting to pile up. Her distance, her secrecy, the change in how she looked at me, it all added up to something that didn't feel right. I couldn't ignore it anymore, so after weeks of sleepless nights and unease, I decided to take matters into my own hands. It felt extreme, but I hired a private investigator. His name was Mike, and I didn't really know what I was expecting, but I couldn't keep living in this state of uncertainty. Mike was a professional who specialized in infidelity cases, and after speaking with him for a few minutes, I knew I was doing the right thing. He set up hidden cameras around the house and followed Megan during the time she said she was out, just to see what she was really up to. I thought I'd be prepared for anything, but when Mike called me one night, telling me he had footage of Megan out at a restaurant with someone, I felt my world come crashing down. I was in shock, my heart pounding in my chest, unable to process the reality of what I was hearing. The investigator sent me the footage, and I drove to his office immediately, praying I was wrong. When I got there, Mike handed me a disc, the weight of it making my hand shake as I slid it into the player. What I saw on the screen was like something out of a nightmare. Megan was sitting across from a man at a fancy restaurant. At first, they were just talking, laughing casually, but as the footage continued, it became clear that this wasn't just a friendly dinner. The way they looked at each other, the intimacy in their body language, it was obvious they had a deep connection. And then, they kissed. My heart sank. I had never been so devastated in my life. Megan, my wife, was cheating on me. The worst part was that she had been lying to my face, pretending everything was fine, making excuses for her behavior, while I was oblivious to the truth. The man she was with didn't look familiar at all, and I had no idea who he was. The footage was clear, and I didn't need any more proof to know that everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. Sitting there in that office, staring at the screen, I felt this overwhelming wave of betrayal, disbelief, and sadness. I couldn't process it all at once. My mind raced through a million different scenarios, trying to figure out when it all started, when she started lying to me, when she decided I wasn't enough anymore. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to see the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, with someone else, someone who wasn't me. As Mike explained the details of the footage, how he had followed Megan and kept tabs on her for weeks, I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but there was no denying what was right in front of me. I had no idea how long this had been going on, or what the extent of it was, but I knew one thing for sure. My life had just been flipped upside down. Megan had betrayed me in the most painful way, and I was left trying to figure out what came next. All of my trust in her, everything I'd built with her over the years, had just come crashing down, and I was left holding the pieces. The days following that call from the investigator were a blur. I had no idea how to process everything. The images of Megan with that man kept replaying in my mind, over and over again, each time feeling like a punch to the gut. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she kissed him, the look in her eyes, like I didn't even exist in that moment. All the little signs that I had ignored, all the things that I'd chalked up to nothing, suddenly seemed so clear in hindsight. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind. How could I have missed it for so long? I wanted to confront her right away, but something in me told me to wait. I needed to be sure, needed to know the full extent of the betrayal before I let her off the hook with a simple question. I needed to know what I was dealing with. I spent the next few days obsessing over the footage, replaying it again and again. I couldn't understand how Megan had been so cold, how she could look at me every day and act like everything was fine while she was sneaking around with someone else. But at the same time, I was terrified to confront her. I didn't know what to expect from that conversation. Would she admit to it? Would she lie, deny everything? Would she turn it around on me and make me the bad guy? I thought about how we'd built our life together, the plans we'd made, the things we'd talked about for the future. I thought about the friends we had, the family we'd planned to start, and how it could all be a lie. It felt like everything I'd known was slipping away, and I didn't know if I could handle it. I wanted answers, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear them. The days dragged on, and each time I saw Megan, I felt this knot in my stomach. She was still acting the same, still pretending everything was normal, still giving me the same excuses and stories about her work events and nights out with friends. She didn't seem like the woman in the video, the one laughing and flirting with another man. But I couldn't let her see how much it was hurting me. I had to keep my composure. I didn't want her to know that I knew, at least, not yet. I needed to confront her on my terms, not let her control the narrative. Then, one night, the moment I had been dreading finally came. I had just gotten home from work, and Megan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, like it was any other night. I had already seen the footage, and I knew what was coming. I had to say something. I had to ask her. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, but I couldn't put it off any longer. I took a deep breath and asked her about the dinner with the man at the restaurant. I watched her face closely as the words left my mouth, trying to read her expression, searching for any sign that she knew I was onto her. Her reaction was everything I could have expected. At first, she looked at me like I was crazy. Then a quick flash of panic crossed her face before she tried to cover it up with that smile of hers, the one I used to find comforting, but now just made my stomach turn. She immediately started with the excuses, telling me that I was misunderstanding the situation. It was just some guy from work, someone she'd met at a networking event, and that it didn't mean anything. We were just talking, she said. You know how it is, you get stuck in these conversations with people at events. She sounded so convincing at first, but I could see right through her. The way she stammered, the way she kept avoiding eye contact, it was all a lie. I didn't want to believe it, but I knew she was lying to me. I knew she was trying to downplay it, like it was no big deal, like she hadn't just betrayed me in the worst way possible. As she continued with her story, I felt this cold rush of anger building inside me. She kept saying the same things. Nothing was going on. It wasn't like that. She was just being friendly. But I could hear the desperation in her voice, the cracks forming as she tried to make me believe something that wasn't true. I let her keep talking, hoping that somewhere in her story there would be a hint of truth, but deep down, I knew what I had seen. I didn't need her to tell me what happened. I already knew. The worst part was that she didn't even seem sorry. She didn't apologize, didn't seem ashamed or remorseful. Instead, she kept trying to twist it, making me feel like I was the one who had done something wrong by questioning her. She blamed me for not trusting her, for being paranoid. She acted like I was overreacting, like I was the one causing problems in our relationship. The more she spoke, the more I realized how deep the lies went. She had been lying to me for months, possibly longer. I couldn't believe the woman sitting in front of me was the same person I had married. My anger mixed with a deep sadness that I couldn't shake. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know whether I should just walk away, leave her to deal with the mess she had made, or whether I should try to salvage what was left of our marriage. The more she tried to deny it, the more I realized that everything had changed. I was no longer the person she could lie to without consequences. I had the proof, and there was no going back. But I wasn't ready to give up just yet. I needed time to think, to process the full weight of what she had done, and to figure out what I was going to do. But one thing was clear. This wasn't the woman I had married, and our life together would never be the same again. The following days after I confronted Megan were some of the hardest of my life. I had expected her to break down in guilt, maybe even come clean and beg for forgiveness. But instead, what I got was an ice-cold denial wrapped in anger and deflection. Her reaction was almost more painful than the betrayal itself. She was defensive, completely unwilling to admit that anything had happened. I could see the cracks in her story, but she kept sticking to it, spinning lies as if she thought I'd actually believe them. I could feel the tension between us grow with every passing hour, and there was this gnawing emptiness inside me, like the person I had known so intimately was slipping further away with each passing moment. Every time I tried to get a clear answer, every time I pointed to the footage, she would just get more frustrated, more defensive. Megan told me it wasn't what it seemed, that I was reading too much into it, that she was just being friendly, and that I was the one who was making things difficult. She didn't even apologize or show any remorse. She just kept telling me to trust her, to believe in her, as if everything I had seen meant nothing. It felt like I was stuck in some sort of twisted nightmare, where the more I tried to confront the truth, the more she twisted it, the more she lied. I wanted to scream, to call her out on everything I had seen with my own eyes, but I couldn't. I was trying to keep control of myself, to keep calm, and not let her see how much she had broken me. Inside, though, I was crushed. It felt like she was playing a game with me, pretending that everything was fine and that nothing had changed. But I knew better. I knew the truth. The footage, the way she looked at that man, the way she kissed him, all of it was undeniable. And yet, Megan was sitting there, acting like I was the crazy one for even questioning her. I remember the silence that followed. It wasn't one of those comfortable silences we used to share, where we could just sit together and enjoy each other's presence. No, this was an empty, suffocating silence that pressed in from all sides. I sat there, feeling the weight of what had been said, trying to find the right words to express what I was feeling, but everything seemed pointless. I wanted to understand why. I wanted to know why she would do this to me. Had I not been good enough? Had I done something wrong? I couldn't stop the flood of questions in my mind, but I knew better than to expect answers from her. The truth was, I wasn't even sure she knew why she did it. Was it just a fling, a moment of weakness? Or was it something deeper, something that had been building for longer than I realized? Megan was so good at pretending, so good at hiding behind her lies, that I could barely tell where the truth ended and the fiction began. I couldn't help but wonder if this was just the tip of the iceberg, if there was more to the story that she wasn't telling me. But I couldn't bring myself to ask. Part of me didn't even want to know. I tried to give her a chance to explain herself, to justify what she had done, but each excuse she offered felt more rehearsed than the last. She told me that the guy at the restaurant was just a business associate, that nothing happened between them, that it was all just friendly conversation. But even as she said it, I could see the cracks in her story. It didn't make sense. Why would she lie about something so trivial? And if it was so innocent, why didn't she just tell me about it in the first place? Why was she hiding it from me, sneaking around behind my back? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deep the lies went. Megan had been living in a different reality, one where she could deceive me and justify her actions without ever feeling guilty about it. She had built a world of excuses and half-truths, and now I was left standing in the ruins of it, trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. The emotional toll of it all was unbearable. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, struggling to stay afloat. The anger was there, simmering beneath the surface, but so was the sadness, the deep, soul-crushing sadness of realizing that the person I loved and trusted had shattered everything we had built. It hurt in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. I didn't know how to move forward. Part of me wanted to leave, to walk away from her and never look back. But another part of me, this stupid, foolish part, wanted to believe her, to give her a chance to prove that she hadn't ruined everything. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, but a small part of me still wanted to fix things, to believe that we could somehow put this back together. The thing was, I wasn't sure if she even cared enough to try. She had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and now, as she sat there, still denying it, I realized that I might never be able to look at her the same way again. We spent the next few days walking on eggshells around each other. There was no communication, no attempt at reconciliation, just a tense quiet that hung in the air. Megan went about her business like everything was normal, and I tried to do the same, but inside, I felt like I was falling apart. I couldn't forget what I had seen. I couldn't erase the image of her with that man from my mind. No matter how much I tried to push it away, it lingered, haunting me at every turn. She was still living in her world of lies, and I was left to pick up the pieces of mine. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how different everything felt now. Our relationship, once full of trust and love, had been replaced with doubt and betrayal. And no matter how many times I asked her to tell me the truth, no matter how many times I tried to get a real answer from her, I was starting to understand that I would never get it. Not from her. Not from the woman I thought I knew. The days that followed the confrontation were nothing short of excruciating. It was like I was stuck in some kind of emotional limbo, unable to escape the overwhelming mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion. Megan was still acting like nothing had happened. She went about her routine, like I hadn't just discovered her betrayal. She'd come home from work, put on her fake smile, and ask how my day went, as if everything was fine. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the destruction she had caused. It felt like I was living with a stranger, not the woman I had spent years of my life with. The silence between us was deafening, and every time I looked at her, all I could think about was the man at that restaurant, the way she had kissed him, the way she had lied to my face. I had never felt so alone in my life. Even when she was physically there, it was as though she wasn't really present. It was like we were two strangers sharing a space, existing side by side, but not really connected anymore. I tried to go about my usual routine, but nothing felt the same. I couldn't focus at work. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even eat without feeling nauseous. I kept replaying the footage over and over in my mind, as if hoping that somehow it would all make sense or that I would wake up from this horrible dream. But it wasn't a dream. This was my reality now. My marriage was falling apart in front of me, and I had no idea how to fix it. I felt the anger bubbling up more and more each day. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the lies, the betrayal, the fact that she had made me doubt everything I had known about our relationship. I couldn't believe how easily she had fooled me, how effortlessly she had pulled the wool over my eyes while going behind my back. The worst part was that she didn't seem to care. She didn't seem to care that she had completely shattered my trust, that she had destroyed the foundation we had built our life on. She was still playing the victim, still acting like I was the one who was at fault for questioning her. The anger I felt toward her was almost suffocating. It was like I was drowning in it, unable to breathe or think clearly. I wanted to lash out, to yell, to make her feel the same pain I was feeling, but every time I tried to express my emotions, I felt like I was getting nowhere. It was like she had built this wall around herself, a wall that I couldn't break down no matter how hard I tried. And yet, even with all the anger I felt, I couldn't shake the sadness. It was the kind of sadness that crept up on you, slow and heavy, until it consumed everything. I missed the way things used to be. I missed the intimacy we had shared, the quiet moments when it was just the two of us, laughing over something silly, or cuddling on the couch after a long day. I missed the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had promised to love me through thick and thin. But that woman was gone, replaced by someone who was capable of doing the unthinkable. I couldn't stop the tears from coming. I couldn't stop the ache in my chest every time I thought about the life we had built and how it was all falling apart. I wanted to hate her, to never speak to her again, but part of me still wanted to fix things, still wanted to believe that there was a way to make it right. The emotional roller coaster I was on was impossible to navigate. One minute, I was consumed with rage, pacing around the house, unable to sit still with all the thoughts racing through my mind. The next minute, I was overwhelmed with sadness, sitting alone in our bedroom, staring at the empty space beside me and wondering how we had gotten here. Every part of me was torn between wanting to move on, to leave her and never look back, and wanting to salvage whatever was left of our marriage, even though I knew deep down that it would never be the same. I started withdrawing from Megan more and more. I couldn't stand being around her, couldn't stand the way she acted like nothing was wrong. I didn't want to eat dinner with her, didn't want to sit in the same room as her, didn't even want to talk to her. The thought of spending another night in the same bed with her, pretending that everything was okay, made me sick to my stomach. But at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to leave. I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. Part of me held on to the hope that maybe she would realize what she had done. Maybe she would finally feel some remorse and try to fix things. But that hope was slowly dying with every passing day. The more I saw her act like nothing had changed, the more I realized that I was the only one who had changed. I had to accept that I wasn't the same person anymore. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I couldn't pretend I wasn't hurting. What made it worse was that I was starting to lose myself in this situation. I wasn't the person I had been before, someone who could trust without question, someone who believed in love and commitment. I felt like I had lost a part of myself in the process of dealing with Megan's lies. The person who had loved her so deeply, so unconditionally, was starting to fade away, replaced by someone who was cynical and broken. I didn't know how to heal, how to move forward. I didn't even know if I wanted to. The hardest part was not knowing what to do next. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. Should I stay and try to rebuild what we had, even though the foundation was cracked beyond repair? Should I leave and start over, knowing that the trust we once shared was gone forever? I didn't have the answers, and that uncertainty ate away at me day by day. I was lost in my own thoughts, trapped in a cycle of anger and sadness, and I didn't know how to break free. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The person I was before Megan's betrayal was gone, and I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The days, weeks, and months that followed were a slow, painful unraveling of everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and marriage. I tried to process what had happened, tried to make sense of Megan's betrayal and my own feelings, but the truth was, I didn't know how to move forward. Every time I thought I had made up my mind, a new wave of emotions would hit me. The anger would rise again, and I would think about leaving, about walking away from the woman who had destroyed our relationship. But then, I would feel the sadness, and I would think about the life we had shared, the years we had spent building something together, and I would hesitate. I was torn between my pain and my desire to salvage something, anything, from this wreckage. But I knew deep down that there was no going back. The person I had been before Megan's affair was gone. The trust that had once been the cornerstone of our relationship was shattered, and no amount of pretending, no amount of apologies, could fix that. I had to make a choice: stay and try to rebuild something broken beyond repair, or walk away and finally start healing. I spent days trying to make the decision. The silence between Megan and me became unbearable. There was no love left, no warmth. Just a cold, empty space that I could feel every time we passed by each other. I started to lose interest in everything. Our house felt like a prison, every room filled with reminders of the life we had once shared, and yet none of it felt real anymore. I couldn't remember the last time we had laughed together, the last time we had been close. The woman I had trusted had vanished, replaced by someone who couldn't even be bothered to apologize for the pain she had caused. I kept waiting for a moment when she would show real remorse, when she would break down and admit what she had done, but it never came. It became clear that she didn't feel the same way I did. She didn't understand the gravity of what she had done. And that was when I realized that there was no future with her, not the way things were. I had always been someone who believed in second chances and forgiveness. But this was different. Megan hadn't just made a mistake. She had crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. She had lied to me for months, had hidden this affair from me, and then had the audacity to pretend like nothing had changed. There was no room for reconciliation when one person was unwilling to face the truth. I could feel myself growing numb to the idea of a future with her. The love I once felt for her was still there, but it was wrapped up in so much pain, so much betrayal, that it had become unrecognizable. I couldn't be with someone who didn't understand what they had done, someone who wasn't willing to do the hard work of making things right. And, in the end, I realized that I wasn't willing to keep sacrificing my own well-being for a relationship that no longer existed. It was hard, harder than anything I had ever done, but I made the decision to leave. I didn't make the choice lightly. There were nights when I stayed awake, replaying everything in my mind, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. But in the quiet moments, when I wasn't consumed by the anger or the hurt, I knew it was the right choice. I couldn't stay with someone who had so completely shattered my trust, who had shown no real remorse for what she had done. Megan had made her choices, and I had to make mine. I had to choose to let go, to stop living in a relationship that was only causing me pain. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about healing, about finding a way to move on from this mess and start a new chapter in my life, even if it was terrifying and uncertain. I told Megan one evening, when the silence between us had reached its breaking point. I didn't yell, didn't get angry, though the urge to do so was there. I simply told her that I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep living in a house that felt like a tomb, haunted by the ghost of what we had once been. She didn't seem surprised. There were no tears, no begging or pleading. She seemed numb, almost relieved, as if she had already known that this day was coming. I think, in some way, she had already checked out of our relationship long before I had. I packed my things, as quietly as possible, as if to avoid the inevitable confrontation that would follow. Megan didn't stop me. She didn't even try to apologize or convince me to stay. The fact that she didn't fight for me made it easier to walk away, though part of me still felt a pang of guilt. But the truth was, I wasn't the one who had ruined our marriage. I wasn't the one who had lied and betrayed the other. And I had to remind myself of that every day after I left. Moving forward wasn't easy. I still felt lost. I still questioned whether I had done the right thing. But slowly, the pain began to fade, and I began to realize something. I wasn't the person I had been before, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The man I was before had trusted too easily, had allowed himself to be deceived because he had believed in the goodness of the person he loved. But the man I was becoming was stronger, more aware of his own worth, and unwilling to let anyone, especially someone who had betrayed him, make him feel less than. It wasn't easy, but I knew that this was the beginning of my healing. I have no idea what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever trust someone like I did Megan, and I don't know if I'll ever love someone the way I loved her. But I do know that I'm not defined by the betrayal I suffered. I've learned to value myself more, to understand that I deserve better than someone who would lie and hurt me like that. And to anyone who might be reading this and going through something similar, I can tell you this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't ignore the signs, and don't let anyone convince you that you're being unreasonable for questioning them. You deserve honesty, you deserve loyalty, and you deserve to feel safe in your relationships. If they can't offer that, then you don't owe them anything. Walk away, and make space for someone who will treat you the way you deserve. Life is too short to settle for less than that. It's been a few months since I walked away from Megan, and although I'm still navigating the aftermath, I've learned so much about myself and what I need in life. At first, everything felt so raw. I moved out, found a new place, and started trying to rebuild. The first few weeks were the hardest. I found myself reaching for my phone, wanting to text her, asking if she was okay, wondering if she missed me the way I missed her. But then I would remind myself why I left, why I couldn't stay in a relationship that had been built on lies and deceit. I had trusted Megan with everything I had, and she had destroyed that trust, piece by piece. The pain of losing her, of losing the life I thought I had, still lingers. There are days when I feel that gnawing emptiness, like I'm missing something, like I'm walking around with a hole in my chest. But those days are fewer now, and the more I reflect on what happened, the more I realize how much I've grown through all of this. In the beginning, I spent a lot of time wondering what went wrong, what I could have done differently. Did I miss the signs? Was I too blind to see that Megan was pulling away long before I realized? I replayed everything in my head over and over, asking myself where I had gone wrong. But in the end, I realized that the only thing I could control was how I responded to the situation. I had trusted her, I had loved her, and that was never the problem. The problem was with her, and I couldn't change that. She had made her choices, and as much as it hurt, I had to accept that those choices had nothing to do with me. They were about her, and whatever was lacking in her life that led her to betray the person who had given her everything. I had to stop blaming myself and start accepting that sometimes things just fall apart, no matter how hard you try to hold them together. In a strange way, I've come to understand that this experience has been one of the most transformative things I've gone through. It's forced me to face my own insecurities, my own fears, and to realize that I don't need someone else to feel whole. I've had to learn how to rely on myself, how to build my own sense of worth without depending on anyone else's validation. For the longest time, I defined myself by my relationships, by the people I loved, and the people who loved me. But now, I realize that my worth doesn't come from anyone else, it comes from me. I am enough on my own. I don't need someone else's approval or affection to feel valuable. I had to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. The hardest part has been letting go of the dreams I had built with Megan. I had envisioned a future with her kids, a house, growing old together. Those dreams are gone now, and I've had to learn to live without them. It's been a slow process of grieving that loss, but I'm starting to see that I can create new dreams for myself. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm starting to believe that I can be happy, that I can have a fulfilling life without needing a partner to complete me. I'm learning to embrace the idea that I don't need someone else to define my happiness. That's something I've had to learn the hard way, but it's been liberating. And, as time passes, I've realized that I'm slowly healing. It's not a fast process, and it's not linear. There are days when I still feel the weight of the betrayal, when I still feel angry and sad. There are moments when I find myself thinking about Megan, wondering what she's doing, if she's changed, if she ever regrets what happened. But those thoughts don't consume me the way they used to. I don't spend my days obsessing over what could have been. Instead, I'm learning to focus on myself, to take care of my own needs and my own emotions. I've started doing things I used to love but had forgotten about, hobbies and activities that I had pushed aside because I was too focused on the relationship. I've started to rediscover who I am outside of a marriage, outside of someone else's expectations. I've also learned to appreciate the people who truly care about me, the friends, the family, the people who never left, who stood by me during the hardest moments. They've been my support system, my lifeline. They've reminded me that I am worthy of love, even if Megan couldn't see that. And while I may never trust the way I once did, while I may never be able to love someone without a part of me always being cautious, I know that I will be okay. I will move on, and I will learn to trust again, but only when I'm ready. In reflecting on all of this, I can't help but think of the advice I would give to anyone who might find themselves in a similar situation. First and foremost, trust yourself. Trust your instincts, even when they tell you something you don't want to hear. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the signs. Don't let someone convince you that your concerns are unwarranted. You deserve honesty, loyalty, and respect, and if you're not getting that, you need to be strong enough to walk away. It's not an easy decision, but it's the only way to protect your heart and your sense of self-worth. And, most importantly, remember that you are enough, just as you are. You don't need someone else to complete you. You are complete on your own, and you are deserving of a love that is honest, genuine, and true. Looking back now, I can't say I'm happy this happened. It's been one of the hardest things I've ever experienced, and the scars of it will likely stay with me for a long time. But I've come to realize that life is full of unexpected turns. Sometimes, we have to go through pain to find the strength we never knew we had. I've found that strength, and although I may never forget what happened, I can choose to move forward and create a future where I am whole, with or without anyone else. And that's something I can be proud of.